My name is Sep Kamvar. Before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge that several of Rajiv's current and former students are here with us today, and I'd like to thank them for coming. In particular, I'd like to thank one of his current students, Alexandra Karolova, for organizing a moving set of tributes from all of his students, which will appear on rememberingrajiv.com later next week. I knew Rajiv in several different contexts. When I was a graduate student, he was my professor. When I was an entrepreneur, he was my closest advisor and angel investor. And when I came back to Stanford as consulting faculty, he was my senior colleague and research collaborator. But above all, Rajiv was always my teacher and my dear friend. I first met Rajiv in the same way that many people have met Rajiv over the course of his life. I stopped by his office to ask for help on an algorithm. Those of us who have met Rajiv in this way would not be surprised at how helpful he was. Many people have spoken very eloquently about his open door and his brilliant mind. But while it was the qualities of his mind that struck me at first, it was the qualities of his heart that I remember the most. Rajiv had a playful heart, and it shone through his trademark sly smile and his twinkle in his eye. He had so much fun with life that when you were with him, you couldn't help but have fun right alongside him. I remember one time I stopped by his office, and he greeted me and he said, "Sep, I've been thinking about you. I have some good ideas for you." And then he paused and he smiled and he said, "Of course, I always think my ideas are good ideas." Later, when we were talking about investing in my company, I had originally had a very high idea of what I thought my company was worth. This is not surprising. Entrepreneurs always overvalue their own companies. Rajiv gently coaxed me into a more reasonable valuation, but not before giving me the playful promise that the next company I start, he'd invest in at whatever valuation I wanted. When I reminded him of this years later, he laughed and he said, "Remind me not to have conversations like that with you." And Rajiv had a selfless heart. At one point early on in our company, I had a conversation with somebody who thought that my company wouldn't succeed. Upset, I called Rajiv the next day, and we met over at the university cafe, and I told him about this conversation. He listened for me rant for about half an hour on how I was going to prove this guy wrong. And then he simply said, "Yes, you will. That's why you're an entrepreneur. Now your challenge is to use that energy to do something good for the world." And coming from a man who had devoted his life to his students and his mentees and his family, so selflessly and without ostentation, those words had immeasurable power. You see, I always regarded Rajiv as my teacher, but what I thought he taught evolved over the years that I knew him. First, I thought he was teaching me about computer science. Later on, I thought he was teaching me about entrepreneurship. But it was not until much later that I realized what Rajiv knew the whole time, that what he was really teaching me is life and how to live it. And Rajiv did not teach me by lecturing me or by telling me what to do. He taught me by being a great man and inspiring me to follow in his example. The Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh once said the following about his mother's passing. "The day my mother died," he said, "I wrote in my journal, 'A serious misfortune in my life has arrived.' I suffered for more than 1 year after the passing away of my mother. But one night, in the highlands of Vietnam, I was sleeping in my hut in my hermitage. I dreamed of my mother. I saw myself sitting with her, and we were having a wonderful talk. She looked so young and beautiful, her hair flowing down. When I woke up, it was about 2 in the morning, and I felt very strongly that I had never lost my mother. I understood then that the idea of having lost my mother was just an idea. It was obvious in that moment that my mother is always alive in me. And when I think about how, almost 10 years after Rajiv first helped me with that algorithm, I still try to emulate his playfulness, his thoughtfulness, and his selflessness. And when I think about how I still try to make him proud, I know that Rajiv is still alive in me, as he is in all of us. He is in the twinkle in the eye of the excited entrepreneurs whom he mentored, and in the bright-eyed curiosity of the students whom he taught. He is in the gentle smile of the mentors who have learned from his example, and in the thoughtfulness of the professors who took him as a role model. And he is in the love and generosity of his family, his friends, and everybody whom he had touched. And I know that he is smiling.